Hey guys, it's Mr. Schmidt here, and in this video we're going to wrap up our discussion of the production possibilities curve by looking at the idea of shifting or moving the PPC. So the first thing I want to do is introduce you to what we might call in economics the classic production possibilities curve. So again, we draw our axes here, and then typically most goods have what we call increasing opportunity cost, right? We learned that from the last video that we did. Now, the two classic types of goods that we put on these axes are actually what we call consumer goods and capital goods. And what I want to do is go over each of these really quickly because this is a common version of the PPC that you often see on the AP exam. So, consumer goods are any goods that are meant to be consumed or used right away. And in economics, when we say the word consume, we mean use. It doesn't necessarily mean to eat, right? That's what we tend to think of when we hear the word consume. But it means use in any context whatsoever. So immediate use. Capital goods are another way of saying physical capital, which we've already talked about in the resources video. Remember, these are goods that are used to produce other goods and services, right? They're man-made tools. And so this is the classic trade-off in economics. Capital goods or consumer goods. Do you make more goods that can be used right away, consumer goods, or do you go towards capital goods, which are goods that can make you more goods and services down the road? Basically, the choice, excuse me, is between immediate consumption, which would be consumer goods, and later consumption, which would be capital goods. Okay, so before we move the PPC, I just wanted to make sure we introduce you to this version of the production possibilities curve because it is something you are going to see down the road. So with that in mind, I'm going to move the page here and actually draw another PPC and talk about why it would move. Okay, so again, we're going to do consumer goods and capital goods. So here's the PPC. And so remember, we talked about before this idea that if you were at a point outside the production possibilities curve, this is unattainable, right? We don't have the resources to get that point H here. So it would follow that if we were somehow able to get more resources, we could move to point H. And when that happens, that is called a shift of the production possibilities curve. And so we draw it by just drawing another PPC, and then we indicate which direction the PPC moved with an arrow. Because it moved outward or increased, we use a rightward arrow. Remember, right means more, left means less. If you remember that now, you will be good down the road. Right means more, left means less. So this means an increase or an outward shift of the PPC, which means we can produce more of both capital goods and consumer goods. An outward shift of the PPC can be caused by one or more of these three things. The first one would be an increase in the number of resources, right? So if we have more resources, more labor, more land, more capital, we can produce more goods and services, right? More consumer goods, more capital goods in this case. So that is one reason the PPC would shift outward. The second would be if we have better resources, right? Maybe a more educated workforce, or maybe better land that is more suitable to growing crops or whatever it is we're producing. Better resources will shift out the PPC. Finally, the last thing that can do this is better technology. So if we have robots that can make goods and services faster, that will shift the PPC outward. Okay? So those are three reasons that the PPC would shift to the right or outward. Again, Remember the arrow. I cannot tell you how many times students will forget the arrow, and it will cost them on an assignment, on an exam, or the AP exam itself. Now, what about, one more thing about this. This is when the PPC shifts to the right, this is also called economic growth. Economic growth simply means we're producing more stuff than we were before. So that's economic growth, PPC shifting to the right. Sorry about that. Now let's do another PPC here. And I'm going to just call this con and cap for consumer goods and capital goods just to save a little bit of time. We'll draw another PPC. Now if the PPC shifts to the left, okay, we would draw it like this. Okay, so now we're producing less of both goods than before. We cannot produce as many capital goods or as many consumer goods as we could before. Okay, and so this is called economic decline or contraction. So we're not producing as many goods and services as before. The economy or the economic system is not doing as well. We cannot produce as much. And the reasons for this, I'm sure you can guess, are just the opposite of what they were for economic growth, which would be less resources, so less labor, land, capital, etc. Worse resources, so resources that don't perform as well as they were before, or less technology, right? Maybe our machines are down, they're not working, whatever the case may be. And so this is economic decline. We're not producing as many goods and services as we were before. And again, we indicate that by a leftward arrow. Remember the arrow. Please remember that arrow. The last thing I want to say in this video is that it is possible, so if I draw the PPC again here, con and cap, okay? So if I draw this PPC again, it is possible for the PPC to shift inward or outward for only one good at a time. So for instance, if I do something like this, okay? So what we can see here is that the PPC has shifted downward or leftward, but only for capital goods. So we can still produce the same number of consumer goods as before, but now we cannot produce as many capital goods for whatever reason. Maybe there is some kind of loss of technology that is only affecting physical capital or capital goods. Okay, so just be aware of that little tweak that they sometimes like to throw at you on questions, where they're only where the change, I should say, is only affecting one good but not the other. So that's all for this video on shifting the production possibilities curve. Until next time, have a great day.